Hey everybody, it's Tim Wagner, and I'm here to tell you about my books coming out soon, my latest one. It's called Hunter Called Night. Check it out. Isn't that a great cover? It's from Flame Tree Press. It's like my sixth book I think I've done with them. I've been very happy with them. This thing's coming out in about 10 days or so, maybe a little less as I film this. Um, who knows when you see it? May already be done and out by the time you see it. Um, what I'm going to do is read a little bit of it for you. First off, let me tell you about it. Like I said, it's from Flame Tree Press. It's called A Hunter Called Night, and it's actually one of the few titles that just popped into my head. I'll tell you that later. It's going to be out May 9th, 2023. So if you're seeing it before then, you can pre-order it. If you're seeing this after that, you can just order it. Best way to describe it is like a lot of my fiction. It's a combination of weird fiction and extreme horror in my own kind of, bizarre mix. The advanced reviews have been good so far. And my favorite right now is from Jess at Goodreads. She says if Quentin Tarantino dropped some acid and then got into an Uber with Guillermo del Toro, who just ate a handful of magic mushrooms, and they rode to Studio Ghibli and stumbled into Hayao Miyazaki's office for a brainstorming session, not even they could come up with anything remotely near this book. Holy shit. So, uh, I think that in general kind of describes the effect of it. So here's the synopsis. A sinister being called Night and her panther-like harriers stalk their quarry, a man known only as Aaron. Aaron seeks refuge within an office building, a place Night cannot go for it's part of the civilized world and she's a creature of the wild. To flush Aaron out, she creates Blight, a reality warping field that slowly transforms the building and its occupants in horrible and deadly ways. But unknown tonight, while she waits for the Blight to do its work, a group of survivors from a previous attempt to catch her, Aaron, are coming for her. The hunter is now the hunted. Okay, so I'm just going to read a bit to you from the opening. Oh, and I want to share that I dedicated this to Josh Mallerman. It says this one's for Josh Mallerman, creative force of nature and positive voice in the horror community. The genre is so much better because you're part of it, and that's so true. Josh is such a powerful. Let's see, I can stick that up there so you can see a little bit. He is such a powerful force in terms of just helping other people, buoying them up. So positive for everybody, just loving horror. So it's hard sometimes after because I've done 50 books or so at this point. It's hard to find people to dedicate them to that I haven't dedicated them to already. So I was really glad to dedicate this one to Josh. All right, this is chapter one. And the book takes place in two timelines, so that's why this one says where it's at and what time. Collier, Ohio. Now, Aaron ran through the woods, early morning air cold on covered skin, sky above a crisp light blue. It looked like it was going to be a beautiful day, and Aaron wondered if he'd live long enough to enjoy it. At the moment, the odds were not in his favor. There was no path here, and he was forced to run with leaping strides as he crashed through undergrowth, thin branches slapping his face and hands. It was the first week of May, plants and leaves a fresh bright green, air smelling of new life. Anyone else would have found the scene pleasant, even soothing, but Aaron could smell the decay hidden within, already gnawing at the greenery. Everything that lived carried death within it, except for him. His death was behind him and closing fast. He could hear the harriers thrashing through the undergrowth as they pursued him. They could be silent as midnight shadows when they wished, but they wanted him to know that they were coming for him, wanted him to be afraid, and he was, very. He saw flashes of darkness in his peripheral vision, and he knew at least two of the harriers had pulled even with him. The other two most likely followed behind, and when the four deemed the time was right, the two on his flanks would rush ahead, whirl around, and come at him, while the pair at his back would race forward and attack from the rear, trapping him. It was exactly what he would have done in their place. He didn't know how long he'd been running. He sensed the harriers on his trail just after sunrise, and they picked up his scent not long after that. He'd been running ever since, and his leg muscles burned, heavy like molten lead, each new step more of an effort than the one before. Pain pierced his lungs with each breath, and his heart beat hummingbird fast. His chest felt tight, constricted, and he wondered if he were on the verge of a heart attack. He saw a break in the trees ahead. Beyond it, a small office building, gray, squat, 3 stories, sunlight glinting off windows, parking lot filled with vehicles. The building was a bland, anonymous structure, bereft of any personality whatsoever, but right then it was the most beautiful thing Aaron had ever seen. He laughed with relief and ran faster, legs no longer heavy, chest no longer tight. Civilization called to him, and if he could reach it, he would be safe from the Harriers and their mistress, for a time at least. The Harriers plunged through the undergrowth with increased speed, their movements almost frantic now, and Aaron knew they'd spotted the office building and intended to bring him down before he could escape them. He had no weapons with which to fight, possessed no special skills. All he could do was keep running and pray he was fast enough. Moments later, he burst out of the woods and onto a neatly trimmed lawn, so surprised to still be alive that he almost stopped running and stood in shocked amazement. He might have, too, if a harrier hadn't emerged from the woods then and come bounding toward him, large paws thudding against the ground. The creature resembled a black panther, but it was bigger and so dark it seemed to be formed from living shadow. The white of its sharp teeth was a stark contrast to its black face, and its feral yellow eyes shone with a cruel, cunning intelligence. The only thing that saved Aaron was the lawn. As vegetation, the grass belonged to the wild, but since it had been cultivated and cared for by humans, it was also part of the civilized world. As such, while the harrier could still tread upon it, its speed was greatly diminished, forcing it to walk instead of run. Aaron's human form had no such limitation, and he continued on toward the parking lot. He knew he shouldn't waste time glancing over his shoulder, but he couldn't stop himself. He saw the harrier chasing him at a walk, head down and leaning forward as if pressing against a strong wind, growling in frustration. The three others emerged from the trees soon after, and they too were forced to slow their pace once their paws touched the lawn. Aaron saw no sign of their mistress, but he knew she was coming. She was never far behind her harriers. He looked forward once more and kept running, unwilling to slow down even for an instant until he had reached safety. The space between the woods and the parking lot wasn't large, no more than 50 feet, but crossing it seemed to take a lifetime. Even though Aaron knew there was no way the harriers could catch up to him now, he still imagined that any moment he would feel the weight of a feline body slamming into him, bearing him to the ground. A metallic blue SUV was the closest vehicle, and when Aaron reached it, he slumped onto its hood and gulped air. He remained like that for several moments, too exhausted to feel any sense of victory or relief. He heard growling then, and he forced himself to stand upright and turn to look at his pursuers. The four harriers sat shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the grass, inches from where the parking lot's asphalt began. There was no obvious barrier between Aaron and the big cats, but the harrier could no more enter the parking lot than if a 3 foot thick steel wall lay between them. Aaron gave the cats a shaky smile. Too late. Again. The harriers' growls grew deeper, and their yellow eyes blazed with frustration. Then she stepped forth from the woods and began walking toward her cats, movements slow and languid as if she were part feline herself. Night was a tall, thin woman with long blonde hair and sharp features. She wore a black leather jacket, black shirt, black leather jeans, and black boots. There were 5 small nubs on her left hand where fingers should be, and her expression was one of barely repressed fury. She stopped when she reached the harriers and stood just behind them, stroking the head of the nearest with her right hand, which was fully intact. You've given me a great deal of trouble these last few years, Aaron. Aren't you tired of running? Despite the anger in her face, Knight's voice was cool and calm, like a nighttime radio DJ's, honey smooth, almost hypnotic. Aaron's throat was dry from breathing so harshly during his run, and when he spoke, his voice was a rasping croak. I'll never stop. Knight's eyes were as yellow as her cat's, and they flashed with irritation. Wherever you go in this world, I can track you. And whatever hole you manage to find to hide in, eventually I'll be able to reach in and pull you out. You can't win, Aaron. It's simply not possible. Up to this point, Aaron had avoided meeting Knight's gaze, but he forced himself to look directly into her eyes now, although he couldn't stop himself from trembling as he did. Seems to me I've been winning for years, he said. Knight clenched her jaw but said nothing. Aaron imagined what he must look like to her, a too lean man with matted shoulder-length black hair and a thick, unkempt beard, eyes sunken, cheekbones prominent, white long-sleeved linen shirt and light brown pants covered with stains, mud, and grass mostly, but there was some blood there, too. Yes, there was. His leather sandals were scuffed and worn, the straps barely holding together. It had been a while since he'd seen himself in a mirror, but he knew what he looked like. That he could be anywhere from 40 to 70, a walking, breathing scarecrow, tired, spent, weak. And there was nothing Knight had more contempt for than weakness. Knight stepped forward, the harriers moving aside to make room for her. Aaron knew she could not reach him as long as he remained off the grass, but his body still tensed as if anticipating an attack. When she reached the edge of the parking lot, she stopped and looked down as if contemplating the unseen barrier between them. Then she crouched, fixed her gaze on Aaron, and pressed her right hand to the ground. Aaron felt her summoning power from deep within, and the air became heavy and charged like the last moments before the eruption of a violent thunderstorm. The grass around her hand dried, turned black, and Aaron saw the leading edge of the dead spot begin edging toward the parking lot, moving slowly, tortuously, a fraction of an inch at a time, but moving nonetheless. The blight spread sideways as well, right and left, moving much faster as it began to trace the lot's outline, and Aaron realized night was attempting to box him in. She stood. "Are we really going to play this game again?" she asked. In answer, Night turned and began running toward the building. Night's laughter followed him. Right, like I said earlier, this thing popped into my head. I just turned 59 not long ago, and I think I was probably around 18 or 19. I was just walking into my bedroom, and the phrase "a hunter called Night" popped into my head, complete with a character. I envisioned him as male then, changed him to female for the book just because it seemed to work better, but looked the same, much the same, all dressed in black, long blonde hair, and the fingers of his of Knight's left hand, with my hand up here, they could break off and turn into these panthers that were her servants. It all just came to me like that, and I've had that in my head for the last 30 years or so, 40 years, just waiting to see what I could do with it, and when it came time to write a new book for Flame Tree, I thought, I think it's time to go ahead and try that. I also combined it with some other ideas too. I thought it'd be really cool to do kind of a siege novel where people are stuck in this one building and they had to go ahead and all kinds of madness is happening, horrible transformations and deaths and everything. I thought it would be cool to have a contrast between the wild being an actual like force and then the civilized world. Um, and I thought it would be kind of cool to have a chase. And then I thought it'd be kind of cool to also have sort of like an Ahab going after Moby Dick kind of thing with people that had previously encountered Night several years ago, determined to try to finish her off once and for all. So I like a lot of always do. Very often with my books, is I throw all that into a pot and stir it all up and hopefully come up with a pretty good stew. So hey, well, thanks so much for listening. Hope you check out the book, and if you do, I hope you enjoy it. I'll put ordering links below, and if you do read the book, you got some comments as time goes by, please feel free to put them in the comments. All right. Okay. See you later.